Okay, I'm back. I had a whole 9-minute video and then my phone went crazy. So I had to start over and it only recorded 2.5 minutes of where I was in my conversation. So I'll start over. I guess this video won't be as long or as in depth as I wanted it to be because my phone went bonkers. Anyways, I was referring to the story of Gideon and how I've been looking at the Old Testament in a different way because some things don't always make sense to me and I get a little stumped. But in Gideon, we don't realize, and just like I was saying, my Bible study, and I didn't realize at the time, I had to go back and read it again, and then I realized it, that the generations of the Israelites during Gideon's time had not even heard really of anything of Yahweh. So they were completely pagan. It had taken 100 to 150 years after Joshua led the Israelites into the Promised Land to the story of Gideon. So the Israelites of Gideon's time did not know their God. Therefore, they were pagan. And it's a lot like a reset. It's a lot like changing of history. It's a lot like even today, where even my coworker was saying some of the kids she was teaching did not even hear of Adam and Eve ever. And so I think it's starting again. So I also thought about things that are in the Bible that I should be marking in one color. I don't know if I mentioned this in the first video because it messed up my thoughts. But anyways, I try to highlight or mark things in the Bible that do make sense in one color and that I've always known. And then in another color, I underline things that maybe aren't the way I thought they were. So in this particular passage of Esther, first of all, some people don't think Esther should be canonized, but that's another story for another time. I don't have enough information of my own to go into that. But another quick thing about this king, Artaxerxes or Xerxes, the kings in the Old Testament seem to have been pretty tall. I know that Saul was head and shoulders above any other man, it says in 1 Samuel. There are depictions of Nebuchadnezzar and his family. His sons were, I've seen stone depictions of him and paintings where he is much, much taller than the other people around him serving him. And I wonder this about Xerxes himself. I've tried to look him up or depictions of him. He looks pretty large himself. So that aside, take note of that. And also let's take note of what Esther 5 says about a scepter, which is something else I should underline in my Bible, about something not being quite what I thought it was. On the third day of the fast, this is the Amplified version, Esther put on her royal robes and stood in the inner court of the king's palace, opposite his throne room. The king was sitting on his royal throne facing the main entrance of the palace. When the king saw Esther the queen standing in the court, she found favor in his sight, and the king extended to her the golden scepter which was in his hand. So Esther approached and touched the top of the scepter. Then the king said to her, "What is troubling you, Queen Esther? What is your request? It shall be given to you up to half of the kingdom." Esther said, "If it pleases the king, may the king and Haman come this day to the banquet that I have prepared for him." So in this instance, I would underline golden scepter in his hand. It was pure gold, I'm assuming. So that's interesting. And scepters weren't just for fanciful, kingly toting around. I really think the scepters had something else to do with technology. And the king had one. Like I said, it wasn't just a symbolic item he held. And then Esther touched it. I mean, I've always assumed that was just ceremonial kind of stuff, that if the king accepted you, you would touch it. Now, something else that I've thought about, if scepters were some type of electrical weapon, uh, the king could use that against you. So in these times, it states earlier, the reason this was significant was Esther knew that no one could go before the king without being summoned. And I was thinking, and she knew she would die if he chose to not accept her coming before him without being summoned. So I always teased, but I actually also now think seriously about if someone came before the king without him wanting them to, would he just zap them with his golden scepter? And maybe her touching it was the symbol of his grace, so that he would not use the scepter against her or anybody else that would come. He showed her favor, and so her being able to touch it was showing that he was peaceful towards her, because he could use it as a weapon against her or anybody else, like I said. So that's really interesting. I would take note of anybody, any king, using a scepter. Something else, and let's go back to Gideon for a second. I won't turn there, but Gideon talked about the Philistines having iron chariots, and that nobody could go against these iron chariots. And I have to look more into that, but that was something else I underlined, because chariots don't seem that foreboding to me compared to, like, I don't know, like, think of a tank today. So I'm wondering if instead of chariots with horses, what if their iron chariots were something more like tanks or some other kind of technology that they, air quotes, want us to think were not around back then, but really were. So anyways, go through the Old Testament. I want to do more videos about the Old Testament because, one, it's super interesting and someone might have something to share with me. Two, I have nobody except my husband really to talk about these interesting things that we have to relearn about. So I'd love to hear anybody else's thoughts, or what you found in the Old Testament to be interesting too, or if you want to know about a certain passage, let me know and I'll look it up and we'll try to study it together. I used to think I knew my Bible super well, and I do know the Bible, thank God. I grew up in a Christian home. I went to Christian school. I'm one of those Christian school kids. I'm one of those Bible college people. So in Bible college, I had to take what would be an equivalent to a Bible minor in my Bible credits. So I've been able to study. God has shown me how to study the original languages a little bit on my own. I have lots of concordances and Hebrew and Greek texts to look, and commentaries when they're appropriate. But those aren't even always appropriate. So anyway, all that to say, start marking up your Bible. Tell me what you find. I'll tell you what I find, and we can talk about it together. It's a fellowship, because we really need that in these days of craziness. Excuse my daughter's YouTube watching music in the background. Have a good day.